gonna record. So thanks for being here today. Can we start off? Well, what is your name and who are you with?
Sure. My name is Meredith Hendricks. I'm the Executive Director at the Land Trust for Santa Barbara County.
And I know the Land Trust does good things. I've worked with it in the past, but can you tell me how is the Land Trust involved with regenerative agriculture, assuming you are?
Yeah. So the Land Trust for Santa Barbara County partners with landowners who are working on securing local food systems, protecting prime soils, soils of statewide significance, et cetera. We work throughout the county to protect important habitat corridors, agricultural operations, as well as providing opportunities for recreation. And so in the case of regenerative agriculture, we can confer multiple benefits by doing conservation easements with agriculture practitioners that are interested in owning and managing their land and doing agriculture. We can hold a conservation easement on that property to ensure that it's never developed and to help affirm some of the regenerative agricultural practices that the landowner desires to put in place.
Well, nice. Do you know what regenerative principles have been in play with farms that you've helped support this way?
Yeah, so I would say regenerative agriculture is newer to the discussion around conservation easements and agriculture in Santa Barbara County. We hold a number of agricultural easements. We hold easements both for irrigated ag as well as rangeland grazing activities, that kind of thing. A number of those conservation easements are not employing regenerative ag. The regenerative agriculture practices that landowners who have done recent conservation easements with the Land Trust are interested in have to do with soil health, water recharge, like sustaining the riparian corridors, the oak woodlands that typically occur adjacent to ag lands in this county. So I would say the big focus is those soil health and then also managing water.
And would you say water, it's mainly in Santa Barbara County, right?
We only work in Santa Barbara County.
Okay. And the water resources, are they are they a danger in Santa Barbara County? And if so, in what way?
Well, Santa Barbara County has been suffering from really severe drought for a number of years. We saw that change in the winter 2022 through 2023, where we went from drought conditions to flash flood conditions. And what happened to ranches and agricultural practices throughout the county at that time was a whole lot of damage to roads and flooding of crops and no place for the water to go. And so I think that water had been in recent memory thought of as very, very scarce. And then more recently than that, we had a winter that showed us it's also about managing it when a whole lot of it comes. And so I would say there's real interest in the groundwater table. There's real interest in maintaining the local aquifers. There's real interest in overall watershed health as it relates to the agriculture lands and the grazing lands in our county. And I would say that there's an emerging recognition that doing too much channeling of flashy creeks or over directing water away from agriculture ends up not being such a useful thing when we have flash floods and really have the opportunity to recapture some of that water. It ends up doing more damage if it's just going in a culvert and it's blowing out a road than it would if it had a natural ability to sort of recharge into the ground.
Yeah, and what is the Land Trust overall vision for land?
So our overall role is to preserve high quality habitat, agriculture land, and offer recreational opportunities in Santa Barbara County. So we're interested in the incredible biodiversity in our region. We're interested in seeing local food systems remain sustainable. And we're interested in making sure that people throughout the county have the opportunity to get outside and enjoy the beauty of this place. We preserve land for public benefit, and that can include the sort of habitat level resources, the agricultural resources, also cultural resources, viewshed protection, that kind of thing.
And I guess it's also for the health of the community. You want good water quality for people not to be affected by it and so forth.
Yeah, no question. Land conservation has a direct relationship to clean air, clean water, and whole, healthy communities.
And would you say doing this helps the issue of global warming and climate change and so forth?
Well, we know that the beautiful rolling grasslands that we have in our county are a very active place for uptake of carbon and nitrogen. And so agricultural practices that enhance the uptake of those things and removing them from our atmosphere is certainly considered a healthy thing. I would say that anything we can do to create greater resilience as a county in terms of land management practices that allow for us to respond to extreme weather events, to manage more thoughtfully the resources we have around water. I think that all plays a role in climate resilience and in climate change.
Do you have any thoughts of what's in the way of regenerative ag being used in Santa Barbara County? Is it education? Is it financial? Any thoughts of
Well,
why?
I think trying to make a living in agriculture, in farming and ranching has been and remains a really difficult thing to do. And I think that farmers, ranchers, people practicing agriculture need to be extremely entrepreneurial, extremely sensitive to changes in market conditions. They're very much at the mercy of weather events, drought and extreme fire and water. And they're barely making it, particularly if they're at the level of sort of a family farm or a family ranch. And they're constantly having to change what they do and how they do it. The average age of people involved in farming and ranching is going up, and it's hard to bring the next generation into this line of work. In general, in Santa Barbara County, folks that are involved in agriculture, landowners, they are perhaps land rich, but resource limited. Their biggest asset tends to be the property that they own, that they may love very much and may not want to get rid of, but that may be where their capital is all locked up. So I think when new ideas or new practices come in, such as those involved in regenerative agriculture, it can feel overwhelming to shift practices because it's already so difficult to make a living. It can feel to a certain extent like the new fad, the new thing, and 5 years from now, it'll be something else. And for farmers and ranchers who've been doing this work their whole lives and remember the stories that their grandparents told about this work, it's narrow margins, it's a lot of gut instinct, and it's very hard work. And so I think for folks already deeply involved in agriculture, making big changes is really difficult. I think for folks that are coming new to the field, it's much easier to set up the intention around regenerative ag if you're just starting.
And perhaps younger people might be more open to it in that they're less set in their ways and so forth?
Well, my experience is, yes, there are younger people coming to regenerative agriculture. My experience is also that people who've done other kinds of work or who have another form of income somehow are interested in getting involved in regenerative agriculture. So they're less dependent on the regenerative ag actually feeding their families and paying for their housing. And that seems to be somewhat essential.
Yeah, I found that too. Any thoughts about whether regenerative ag can be economical, whether you can grow as much food as the traditional farming method? Some people would say you can't, and others would say you can. Do you have any knowledge about that?
I don't. I'm not an expert in yields. What I would say is, I think there's a big marketing opportunity behind regenerative ag where you could create demand for certain kinds of products that have a resource background. I know there's a lot of people involved in regenerative ag that are marketing their products as particularly good things for people to consume. And so I think if you're savvy about those kinds of things, you can command a certain value for your product versus just focusing on sheer yield and the prices that come with volume.
And I wonder if that's more so in Santa Barbara County of marketing with the regenerative ag info. People Well, I don't know if you know that, whether that's the case or not, but whether Santa Barbara County tends to be more open to these new ways. Any thoughts?
I think people living in California and the Central Coast in particular really love the idea of eating locally and love the idea of supporting local producers. So I think this is an area that's well suited for people to have excitement around regenerative agriculture. Securing healthy food remains a problem for a lot of folks throughout the county. We don't have equitable access to high quality local food, but the folks that do really celebrate this kind of local food.
A certain amount of regenerative ag has to do with indigenous knowledge, older ways. Do you have any thoughts about the importance of indigenous knowledge?
Well, I think we as a sort of colonial Western society have demonstrated in a short period of time, we know how to exploit resources and overuse them. And I think anything we can learn from societies and cultures that existed over thousands and thousands of years effectively and in harmony with nature, I think we would be silly not to pay attention to that. I hope that we are increasingly moving towards including traditional ecological practices and that important historical knowledge into our relationship with the land and how we live on this planet.
That makes a lot of sense. Is the Land Trust involved with the Chumash community at all?
The Chumash community in Santa Barbara County is really diverse. There are a number of tribes, tribal entities. There's federally recognized tribe here, as well as a number of unrecognized bands. And the Land Trust is very interested in establishing relationships and looking for opportunities to work together with Chumash tribes in the county. It's something that's a big priority for our organization.
That makes sense. Well, you covered a certain amount of good material here. Well, one thing you mentioned, I think, was biodiversity. What would you say is the value of biodiversity?
Well, so California is one of the most biodiverse regions on the planet, and Santa Barbara County, as the southern portion of the Central Coast, I mean, we are home to the southern end of northern species and the northern end of southern species. We're the place where the California shoreline changes direction all of a sudden. And we have 5 rolling mountain ranges that go across our county. And so what we find ourselves living in is in a place of incredible abundance, a lot of endemic, sort of here and only here kinds of species. And I think when you have biodiversity, you have resilience, you have the ability for Mother Nature to adapt, you have really spectacular conditions that have fostered this abundance of life. And I think it's our responsibility to make sure that that diversity can continue to thrive.
Makes sense. You mentioned the importance of maintaining riparian corridors and so forth. And what's that? How's that important to the average person?
Well, Santa Barbara County has a Mediterranean climate in which we have pretty fair weather most of the year, and then we get the majority of our rain, in the fall, into winter, and then into early spring. I think maybe the time of having truly reliable seasons has passed, but it is still the case that when we get rain, it tends to arrive in sort of big deluges where we have creeks that don't run all year, but the water is just below the surface and the water table rises real quickly when we have rains. And suddenly we have creeks that are filled with water and that water needs a place to go. And so when we work on watershed health, what we're talking about is working from where a creek starts to where it lets out. And if that can be a healthy system, an intact system, then we're providing habitat for all the plants and animals that depend on the water. We're providing opportunities for the water table to remain healthy. We're providing opportunities for that cleaning of the water and the air that's associated with it. All of those things contribute to the beauty that we see and the quality of life that we have here. If we didn't have those watersheds and those freshwater creek systems, we'd be living in a desert.
True. Where does the Land Trust get its money to help preserve land?
We raise money from a variety of sources. So land in Santa Barbara County is extremely expensive. This is a world-class real estate market. So a lot of the funding for the actual acquisitions, the transactions that we do, comes from public grant sources, government grant sources. We work closely with California Department of Fish and Wildlife, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, the Coastal Conservancy. There are programs now that are geared towards preservation of ag land at risk of sprawl development. We've done very well with those grant programs. There's funding through Department of Defense for conservation. There's a whole lot of pots of money in California right now to do the actual deals. It can take anywhere from a year to a decade to do a deal, however, and so we really rely on individual supporters. We have members, major donors, private foundations, family foundations, corporations that all come together to support our work so that we can pay our expert staff who know how to navigate these very complex science-based real estate transactions.
Get some water. Be right.
Sure.
Well, thank you, Marilyn. You've covered some good material. Is there anything else you'd like to say about the importance of regenerative ag?
I guess I hope we can always figure out a way to grow our food in the soil and that we avoid a future in which all food is grown indoors. I think to the extent we can live in relationship to the land as opposed to working against it or trying to control it, we will be better off, and so will future generations.
Well, excellent. Well, thanks so much for participating and giving your input to our documentary. And if I have further questions in the future, can I contact you?
Yes, please. And will you let me know what happens and when you've got your film together and all that?
Will do. We'll keep you in the loop.
Okay, Larry. Take
Thanks,
care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.